Emma's hand froze mid-air, the wine glass slipping from her fingers and shattering against the hardwood floor. There, on the television screen behind the bar, was the man she'd spent last night with, the single dad she'd booked through the exclusive companionship app, now being announced as Alexander Reid, the reclusive billionaire CEO of Horizon Technologies, unveiling a revolutionary new product. The same man who, just hours ago, had been in her bed, claiming to be Alex, a struggling single father who moonlighted as a paid date to make ends meet. The same man whose laugh had made her stomach flutter, whose gentle touch had awakened something she'd thought long dead inside her. "That's impossible," she whispered, ignoring the bartender's concerned questions about the broken glass. Her mind raced through every moment of their night together, his calloused hands that he'd claimed came from construction work, the genuine way he'd spoken about his daughter, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd mentioned his late wife. The way he'd noticed her flinching at sudden noises and quietly positioned himself between her and the door without making her feel weak. Had it all been an elaborate lie? And worse, had he somehow discovered who she really was, what she was hiding from the world? If her identity was exposed, everything she'd built could crumble overnight. What Emma couldn't know was that Alexander had recognized her the moment she'd booked him, not as Emma Porter, the freelance graphic designer she claimed to be, but as Emilia Portova, the brilliant programmer who had mysteriously disappeared from the tech world 3 years ago after creating an algorithm that his company had been desperately trying to acquire. An algorithm that could revolutionize artificial intelligence as the world knew it. He'd spent the evening fighting his conscience, torn between his mission and the unexpected magnetism of the woman who quoted obscure poetry when nervous and absently solved complex equations on napkins when she thought he wasn't looking. Their night together had been no accident. Alex had been searching for Emilia for years, not just for her code, but because her disappearance had haunted him in ways he couldn't explain. When her profile appeared on the app, a service he'd joined on a dare from his executive team who claimed he'd forgotten how to connect with real people, he'd seized the opportunity, creating a false identity that might appeal to her. What he hadn't counted on was the genuine connection that sparked between them, threatening both his business objectives and his carefully guarded heart. He hadn't expected to find himself telling her about his childhood stutter, something not even his board members knew about. If you're enjoying this unexpected twist, hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you've ever discovered someone wasn't who they claimed to be. Emma's mind flashed back to their dinner, how his eyes had lit up when she'd absent-mindedly solved a complex logic puzzle on the paper placemat, a habit from her old life she should have suppressed. Had that been the moment he'd confirmed her identity? She grabbed her phone, ready to delete every trace of herself online, when it buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk, Emilia. Your algorithm isn't what you think it is. People are in danger." Her hands trembled as she remembered how he'd asked about her recurring nightmares, how close she'd come to telling him about the threats that had driven her underground. Meanwhile, across town, Alexander paced his penthouse office, loosening his tie as his chief security officer delivered the news. "Sir, we've confirmed that someone accessed our secure servers last night during the exact hours you were with Ms. Porter. The timing can't be coincidence." Alex ran his fingers through his meticulously styled hair, messing it up the way Emma had done last night when she teased him about looking too perfect. Alex slammed his fist against the desk. "She couldn't have. I was with her the entire night." He remembered how she'd curled against him in her sleep, whispering names he didn't recognize, her body tense even in unconsciousness. The way she'd flinched when he'd reached for the check, as though expecting to be grabbed. "Then she has an accomplice," his security chief insisted. "The Chimera Group has been after her algorithm for years. They'll stop at nothing to get it, and eliminate anyone who stands in their way." The security chief, Davidson, had been with Alex since before the Billions, since the days when they'd shared ramen noodles in a garage startup. He was the only one who knew about Alex's secret visits to his wife's grave every Sunday, rain or shine. Alex stared out at the city skyline, remembering how Emma had trembled in her sleep, how she'd whispered a name he didn't recognize. What if she wasn't running from the spotlight, but from something far more dangerous? What if she wasn't the threat, but the one being threatened. He had 24 hours before the product launch that would change his company's future, and possibly put Emma directly in the crosshairs of some very dangerous people. He twisted the worn wedding band he still wore on a chain beneath his shirts, a habit when making difficult decisions. Can you believe what's happening? Drop a comment with your theories about who's really behind the server breach. 3 hours later, Emma slipped into the service entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel, her heart pounding as she navigated the kitchen in the catering uniform she'd managed to procure. The hotel was hosting the pre-launch gala for Horizon Technologies, and somewhere in this building was the man who had deceived her, and possibly the people who had been hunting her for 3 years. She needed to know which side Alexander Reid was really on before she disappeared again. She touched the small scar behind her ear, a permanent reminder of the last time she'd trusted the wrong person. "You're late," barked a supervisor, thrusting a tray of champagne flutes into her hands. "VIP section, now." The woman's harsh tone triggered Emma's anxiety, the same feeling she'd had during those terrifying days after her algorithm was first recognized. Emma's hands shook as she entered the ballroom, scanning for Alexander's face among the sea of tech elites and investors. When she finally spotted him, the champagne glasses clinked dangerously on her tray. He was even more striking in his tailored tuxedo than he had been in the casual clothes he'd worn on their date, commanding the room with an easy confidence that made her heart race despite her anger. Yet she noticed the tight line of his jaw, the same tension she'd seen when he'd spoken about losing his wife to cancer 4 years ago. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The shock on his face was genuine, he hadn't expected to see her here. Before she could decide whether to approach him or flee, a hand gripped her elbow. "Hello, Amelia," came a voice that sent ice through her veins. "It's been a long time." She turned to find Victor Zhao, CEO of the Chimera Group and the man who had threatened her family when she refused to sell him her algorithm years ago. The man she'd been running from ever since. The man whose cologne still triggered panic attacks, whose distinctive ring had left the scar she'd just touched. "You two know each other?" Alexander appeared at her side, his expression unreadable, though Emma caught the slight twitch in his left eye, the same tell she'd noticed when he'd bluffed during their poker game last night. "Oh, Alex and I go way back," Victor smiled coldly, his manicured nails digging into Emma's arm. "In fact, we've been partners in the search for you and your precious code for quite some time." Victor's smile never reached his eyes, which remained as flat and emotionless as they had been the night he'd ordered his men to make an example of her assistant who'd tried to help her escape. The tray slipped from Emma's hands, champagne and glass exploding at their feet as the room fell silent. She felt the phantom pain of stitches in her scalp, heard the echo of her mother's voice begging her to run. If you're on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss what happens next. "That's not true," Alexander said firmly, his eyes never leaving Emma's. "Victor approached me last year with a partnership offer I declined. He's been trying to infiltrate my company ever since." He turned to Victor. "Including planting someone to breach our servers last night while trying to frame Emma for it." Alexander subtly shifted his stance, placing himself between Emma and Victor, the same protective gesture he'd made last night when a drunk patron had approached their table. Victor's smile didn't waver. "Always the hero, aren't you, Reid? Tell me, did you enjoy playing poor single father to lure her in? Was the daughter even real, or just another prop in your performance?" Victor's voice carried the same silky menace it had when he described exactly what would happen to Emma's elderly father if she didn't cooperate. Emma backed away from both men, betrayal burning in her chest. "You were both using me." Her voice cracked on the last word, the same way it had when she'd finally told Alexander about her parents' death in what she'd claimed was a car accident. "Lily is real," Alexander said quietly. "Everything I told you about her was true. The only lie was my financial situation." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I recognized your coding style in an anonymous security patch 3 months ago. I've been trying to find you to warn you, Victor has weaponized an early version of your algorithm. That's why I created the profile, hoping you might respond if you thought I wasn't a threat." His eyes held the same intensity they had when he told her about holding his wife's hand as she took her last breath. Security guards were moving toward them now, responding to the commotion. Victor's hand slipped inside his jacket, toward the same pocket where Emma knew he kept the small pistol he'd once pressed against her temple. "We need to go," Alexander whispered urgently. "Now." He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against the small burned scar on her wrist, the one he'd gently kissed last night without asking its origin. In a split-second decision that would change everything, Emma took his outstretched hand. They burst through the service exit into the rainy night, Alexander pulling her toward a motorcycle parked in the shadows. "My security team will expect me to take the car," he explained, handing her a helmet. "This gives us a head start." His hands were steady as he helped her with the helmet, the same steadiness she'd noticed when he'd bandaged her finger after she'd cut it slicing lemons for their drinks. "Where are we going?" Emma demanded, still not certain she should trust him. She clutched the small taser in her pocket, the one she'd carried every day since escaping Victor's compound. "To meet Lily," he said simply. "And to show you what Victor plans to do with your algorithm." His voice carried the same determination she'd heard when he told her about fighting to adopt Lily as a single father, battling a system biased against men raising daughters alone. The motorcycle roared through the rain-slicked streets, Emma's arms wrapped tightly around Alexander's waist, her mind racing faster than the machine carrying them. Every instinct told her to run in the opposite direction, yet something deeper, something that had recognized a kindred spirit during their night together, urged her to see this through. She remembered how he'd known exactly when to hold her tighter and when to give her space, as though he'd read the user manual to her complicated heart. Loving this wild ride? Double tap that like button and share with friends who love unexpected twists. They arrived at a modest brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, nothing like the mansion she would have expected from a billionaire. Alexander led her inside, where a teenage girl with his same intense eyes looked up from a complex-looking computer setup. The girl had his stubborn chin but softer features that must have come from her mother, and the same habit of chewing her lower lip when concentrating. "You found her," Lily said simply, not a question but a statement of fact. She had a streak of purple in her dark hair and wore a vintage band t-shirt that Emma recognized from the underground punk scene she'd briefly been part of in college. "You're not a child," Emma said, confusion washing over her. She remembered Alexander's stories about school plays and science fairs, about a little girl who needed bedtime stories. "I'm 17, Lily replied, pushing her glasses up her nose with the same gesture Alexander had used last night. "And I'm the reason my dad's been looking for you." She turned her laptop around, showing lines of code that made Emma's blood run cold. "Victor's people took your algorithm and merged it with some military-grade surveillance tech. They're calling it Project Oracle. It doesn't just predict behavior, it manipulates it." Lily's fingers bore the same ink stains Emma's did, a programmer's badge of honor from writing notes on her skin when inspiration struck. Alexander's hand found the small of Emma's back, steadying her. "The product we're launching tomorrow is a safeguard, a firewall specifically designed to block Oracle's capabilities. But it's not perfect. We need the original architect of the core algorithm." His touch was gentle but firm, the same way he'd guided her through the crowded restaurant last night. "You need me," Emma whispered, recognizing the elegant solutions in the code that could only have come from someone who truly understood her work. Someone who thought like she did. "Yes," he admitted. "But that's not why I spent the night with you." His voice dropped, vulnerability replacing the confident CEO persona. "I spent the night with you because for the first time in years, I met someone who saw me, not my money, not my company, just me." The same raw honesty she'd heard when he'd confessed his fear of failing his daughter, of not being enough for her without a mother's presence. Lily rolled her eyes. "Dad, focus. Victor's people have already traced your motorcycle's GPS." She typed furiously, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the same dexterity Emma had once been famous for. "I'm trying to spoof the signal, but they're good." A security alert flashed on her screen, showing multiple vehicles converging on their location. "We have maybe 10 minutes, Alexander said grimly, the muscle in his jaw twitching the way it had when he told Emma about his own father's abandonment. "Emma, I know you have no reason to trust me, but right now, we need to make a choice. Together." He held out his hand, the same way he had when asking her to dance in her tiny apartment, careful not to pressure, leaving the decision entirely to her. Emma looked between father and daughter, her mind racing through possibilities. "I need to see the code, all of it. And then I'll decide." She pushed up her sleeves, revealing the constellation of small scars that told the story of her escape from Victor's compound 3 years ago. For the next 8 minutes, Emma immersed herself in the digital world she'd abandoned years ago, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she examined what Victor had done to her creation and what Alexander was proposing as a countermeasure. The elegant solutions in Alexander's code couldn't have been created by someone just pretending to understand her work. This was the work of someone who truly grasped the ethical implications of what she'd built. She recognized his distinctive approach to problem-solving, the same methodical yet intuitive style he'd shown when fixing her broken sink last night. "Your countermeasure has a fatal flaw," she finally said, looking up at Alexander. "But I can fix it." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing the small scar Victor's ring had left, the one Alexander had noticed last night but hadn't questioned. The sound of vehicles pulling up outside made them all freeze. "We're out of time," Lily said, already packing up equipment, her movements efficient and practiced, suggesting this wasn't the first time they'd had to move quickly. "There's a panic room," Alexander started, but Emma shook her head. "No. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding." She stood, a new determination in her eyes. "I created this algorithm to help people understand each other better, not to manipulate them. It's time I took responsibility for what I built." She squared her shoulders, the same way she had when standing up to a rude waiter who'd been dismissive of Alexander in his casual clothes. Alexander's eyes widened with admiration. "What are you suggesting?" He leaned forward slightly, the way he did when truly engaged, giving her his complete attention. "We go public, right now. We livestream everything we know about Project Oracle before Victor can stop us." She turned to Lily. "Can you set that up?" Emma's hands were steady now, the trembling gone, replaced by the calm focus that had once made her the youngest department head at MIT. Already on it, the teenager grinned, fingers flying across her keyboard. "I've been maintaining an encrypted channel for emergencies. Dad thought I was just being paranoid." She shot her father a triumphant look, the same competitive spark Emma had seen in Alexander's eyes during their chess game. "This could cost you everything," Emma warned Alexander. "Your company, your reputation." She thought of how tenderly he'd spoken about building his company from nothing after his wife died, how it was his legacy for Lily. He took her hand, his touch sending electricity through her despite the danger surrounding them. "Some things are worth the risk." His thumb traced the small burned scar on her palm, silently acknowledging the risks she had already taken. If you're inspired by Emma taking a stand, hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe in doing what's right. As Lily prepared the live stream, Alexander pulled Emma into the kitchen, away from his daughter's ears. "Before we do this, there's something you shall know," he said, his voice low and intense. "That night we spent together, it started as a mission, yes. But what happened between us was real. I haven't felt that kind of connection since my wife died." His eyes held the same vulnerability they had when he'd confessed his fear of thunderstorms, a childhood phobia he'd never outgrown. Emma studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. "How can I believe you?" She unconsciously touched the thin silver chain around her neck, the one containing her parents' wedding rings, all she had left of them after fleeing her former life. "You're a data scientist," he said with a small smile. Look at the evidence. I could have had you brought in at any time over the past 3 months. I could have stolen your work. Instead, I wanted to meet the mind behind the code. His hand gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. And then I met all of you, and the mission didn't matter anymore. His fingers lingered near the scar behind her ear, a silent acknowledgement of her unspoken pain. The sound of breaking glass from the front of the house shattered the moment. They're here. Lily called, her voice steady despite the danger, the same composure Alexander had shown when handling a kitchen fire during their dinner. Alexander pulled Emma close, his lips brushing her ear. Whatever happens next, know that meeting you changed everything for me. The